Welcome to the Coffee and Counseling Podcast, where two licensed psychotherapists give you their unfiltered opinions on mental health, wellness, life, and everything in between. It's real, raw, and ready to challenge what you think you know. Get ready for some tough love. Before we begin, just a brief disclaimer, this podcast is for educational and informational purposes only and does not take the place of therapy. We hope you enjoy today's session. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's session of Coffee and Counseling, where we don't spill the tea, but the coffee will be piping hot while we talk about all things counseling. We're your hosts, Rachel Steinhardt
and Stephanie Schaick. Today, we're diving into attachment styles, how the way we connected to our caregivers as kids often shows up in our adult relationships. Whether you've heard of an anxious, avoidant, secure, or disorganized attachment, or maybe this is completely brand new to you, we're going to break it down in a way that's real, practical, and maybe even help you to call yourself out with a little bit of humor. So grab your coffee and let's get into it. Rachel, get us started with one of your highs and lows of this week, please.
Okay. High definitely has to be that our holidays are coming up. Jewish people are going hardcore into holiday season, and it's always so exciting, especially seeing it through a different lens of being a mom and watching your kids get excited about the things and like do the little projects that you used to do in school and coming home with all of these special things that they made for the holiday. It's just so adorable and so special. I guess my low would be that my entire family is doing it together in New York, and we're just not in a place right now where we can travel again. So I won't be able to spend the time with them. And it's hard, like knowing they're all going to be under one roof which like really doesn't happen a lot. But I'm trying to just stay so grateful in the fact that I'm not like alone for the holiday. I have this beautiful family that I've built and I get to spend it with them. And, you know, I guess in this way, I get to really, focus and enjoy my kids' experience of it, as opposed to like if I were home and it would just be a lot of a balancing act and like chasing them around somebody else's house. So trying to stay focused on that. But yeah, definitely missing my family for sure. How about you, Steph?
All right. So I would say that my high for this week is last night I went to a wine dinner at Carrabba's with my mom. We've done this every so often. Yeah, it was nice. The food was delicious. The wine was amazing. It was really fun. So, and it's nice to do that because I normally have it like in the middle of the weeks too.
Yeah.
So it's nice to do that. Like it's not like a Saturday night. You could do it on a Wednesday or a Tuesday. That's always a nice break to the week. So I would say that was my high. My low, and this is super annoying, but my low, I got an invoice from a rental car company that I used back in DC that apparently I got a speeding ticket in one area in DC. And what happens? Yeah, I was like really annoyed by it.
And they hunted you down.
They hunted me down. So it was I guess it was by plate. You know, it was a camera. It wasn't I didn't get pulled over or whatever. It was like 10 miles per hour over the speeding, over the speed limit. I have no idea really where it was, but when I got the invoice, I'm like, you know, there's so many scams these days. Like, how am I supposed to know if this is like legitimate? And there was some information, but then it's like, oh, go here and then you can pay it here, or go here and then you can get the information for the ticket.
I think the best bet is to actually call the company.
So I tried.
Or like check your name online and like registered license as to like what is written under your name.
Yeah. So it wouldn't go under my license because it's through the license plate from the rental car. Like no one pulled me over. But it's like
right. That's crazy.
Right. And so like I'm like I had no idea, and I'm like new to this, and driving there was crazy or whatever. But it's like it was really difficult, and they're like, go here to pay or to see the ticket. I went there and it wasn't registering that all the information it gave me. So I'm like, first off, did I get a ticket? Do I actually do you want your money? Like, can you just make it easier?
Why are you making this so hard? By the way, I say that all the time about taxes. I'm like, you make it so difficult for people to pay taxes to the point where some people literally go to jail out of like legit innocent mistakes that they made. And don't worry, I'm very aware there are plenty of people who do not make innocent mistakes. But it honestly, it's really easy to mess up your taxes unknowingly and unwillingly.
Yeah.
And they don't make it easy. Like you need to pay someone just to pay your taxes. It's like, that's how I feel about tickets. Also, I'm just like, what? Like, Make
Yeah.
it make sense.
I know, it's like add insult to injury. So like I was super annoyed by it in general and then making it so difficult to actually make sure it's legitimate and then pay it. And I'm like, I don't have the time, energy or anything to fight it. So once I was able to make sure it was legitimate, which took me a long time to figure out how, and paid it. So I'm annoyed by it, but I have to just let it go because it is
Yeah,
what it
girl,
is.
pick and choose your battles. Ain't nobody got time.
Exactly. And it's not on my license. So if it's not on my
Right.
license, all right, at least it's not going to affect me, moving
Thank
forward.
goodness. Okay, good.
Let's talk a little bit about why we wanted to cover this topic for this week. So, attachment theory gets thrown around a lot, and I believe a lot of people are identifying with it and throwing around these terms. And we're going to talk about what do they actually mean? Where does it come from? How much should it play a role in your life, or does it play a role in your life? How it actually shows up. We are hoping to help you get a better understanding of these attachment styles and how it works for you.
So let's get into it. So, honestly, where does the attachment theory even come from? Where did this originate? Because it's like the new fad now. Everyone's obsessed with the concept of what attachment style are you? I feel like this is like the new thing they're asking on dates, honestly. But let me know, guys, if you're still in the dating scene, is this like a thing people are talking about? Because based off of my clients, this is a really popular topic. And one of the reasons we wanted to cover it. So, a hot minute ago in the 1950s, a British psychiatrist named John Bowlby, who was also a psychoanalyst, he studied how children bonded with caregivers and how the separation from the caregivers impacted them. And so whenever we hear the concept of psychoanalyst or analytic type of therapy and we think about, oh, going into the past, a lot of the time I think we go back into traumas, and this can very much be connected to traumas, but a lot of it is also just understanding where did we learn these behaviors? Where did we learn this way to love or to not be able to love or not be able to receive love? Where did we learn or gain this understanding of how we interact with people throughout the world and as we grow up? He proposed that humans have an innate need for an attachment to ensure survival, right? And that's why I always say in prison, isolation is one of the worst punishments that you can get aside from the death penalty, literally,
Mhm.
because we as humans are just not meant to be separated from people, which is why COVID hit everybody so hard. If you're someone that's still recovering from COVID in a mental health space or in any other space, it makes sense. We were not meant as human beings to be cut off and separated from all the people in the world.
Mhm.
And we saw that, and he really saw that an early caregiver's relationship was the blueprint for later on relationships in life, and what we learned and gained for better or for worse from our caregivers or lack thereof. Then moving forward a little bit in the 1970s, a woman named Mary Answorth, she was Bowley's colleague, and she was also a developmental psychologist. So she created the famous, I don't know if anyone's ever heard of it, the stranger situation experiment, where she really observed infants' reactions when a mother would leave their infant and then return and see how the child reacted. And this here's where they really identified the first attachment styles in infants. This is where the concept of secure attachment, anxious or ambivalent, and avoidant attachment came up. And then in later research in the 1980s, so they're around early like 2000s, a psychologist, like Mary Main, expanded the theory to include disorganized attachment. And this is really a mix of anxious and avoidant attachment, often linked to trauma, which we will discuss later on. That's where that really started to develop. And researchers also studied how these childhood styles carry into adult and romantic relationships, into friendships. It can even be into your relationships with your coworkers, in all of the way that we interact with people throughout our daily lives. Really, in today's world, attachment theory is one of the most researched frameworks in psychology. It's used in therapy, in parenting, in relationship education, and on social media. It's become obviously very popular, one of the reasons that we're covering it. But sometimes, and this is why we're doing this podcast, it can really become oversimplified and turning into labels instead of a nuanced tool. So, why is this so important for us to understand? right? And why can this be helpful? First of all, it's creating a self awareness. It helps you notice patterns within yourself, helps you learn how to get through difficult conflict, respond to different situations with other human beings. Like, oh, I got so anxious when he didn't text me back, or he shut down when there was an argument in the family. How do we deal with those things? And Steph and I talk a lot about how self-awareness is truly a humongous key in how you open the door to your mental well-being and how you interact with the world and how to better the parts of you that you want to work on. Another thing to really think about is that this is kind of like a language for the unseen. So it puts words to behaviors that used to feel confusing or shameful that make it easier to reflect and talk about with a therapist or a partner. It also creates the space for us to have not just compassion for others, but for ourselves. And instead of seeing yourself as like needy or cold and all these other negative words that we come up with to describe why we're doing what we're doing, we can really recognize, I learned this in response from my early relationships. It makes sense that this is how I'm feeling, and this is how I can learn and move forward. It's not used as an excuse, but really helping us understand ourselves better. And it also helps us when you're in a friendship or in a or in a romantic relationship. It helps our partners understand us and work accordingly. And this really makes me think about a year ago, I got into, well, I didn't really get into an argument. I really, really, really close friend of mine seemed a little bit more distant. And because of my past, I'm sitting there thinking, is this all in my head? Am I crazy? Like, I feel like something's off. And this went on for months. And one of my biggest fears that I'm working on is kind of when I'm faced with one of these situations, kind of getting the courage to go and face it head on and be like, what is happening? And finally I said to myself, like, you got to practice what you preach. And eventually I went to this person about it and I was like, what am I imagining things? Like, did something happen? What's going on? And this person essentially expressed to me that I had said something or done something that had triggered something in childhood for them that they are very, very sensitive to because of the way that they were raised and how their parent handled certain situations. And obviously, we were able to, thank goodness, talk it out and work through it. And just, our love was stronger than the argument. And we were able to understand each other better. And now I'm also able to be more sensitive moving forward as to what this person struggles with in terms of what they've been through. And honestly, that is what attachment styles is like, are having that conversation, and my ability, because of my background also, to have that conversation, like, essentially saved one of the most important friendships to me. So it really can't be a roadmap for healing. Attachment styles, they aren't fixed. But knowing your tendencies really gives you a starting point for growth so that you can move toward a secure and healthy attachment where you can have trust and safety and healthy interdependence. But then some people might ask, like, okay, is this necessary? Well, it can be definitely necessary for some people, because without this framework, people often blame themselves or other people without seeing that, hey, there is a bigger picture. Maybe there's pieces of the puzzle that I'm missing. I need to understand how we got here, why I'm in this situation, why I'm thinking or feeling or experiencing these situations in this way. It really highlights how past experiences shape present relationships. Sometimes many people, they're not aware of what's happening in their relationships until they learn about these attachment styles. So it really, again, goes back to that awareness piece. In therapy, this can be a very, very strong, very powerful entry point for working on deeper wounds like abandonment, trust, and intimacy, and really gives us that space to start that therapeutic journey of, let's go back and unravel some of that so that we can get a better understanding about why this is happening for you now. So think about, okay, how you dealt with your mom not answering when you were 5. That may now show up on how you deal with your partner not answering your text at 35, right? So now thinking, okay, mom is late. Instead of thinking she doesn't care about me, I'm able to think, well, maybe she's stuck in traffic. Being able to come up with that with that thought is a very secure way of experiencing attachment. So that would be a secure attachment. An anxious attachment might be, okay, mom's late, she abandoned me. Yes, I live where I'm currently located because she's not coming. And going through these different ways in which we can formulate thoughts around our relationships is a really great way that therapists help clients process some of these thoughts that come up for them that may not be beneficial and may not be healthy, and also may really not be rooted in reality, to create more secure and healthier thought processes.
All right, so let's get into the different types of attachment styles and dig in a little bit more to each one of those. So we're going to start out off with the ideal attachment style, which you probably already have gathered is the secure attachment style. So why the secure attachment style typically develops is it usually comes from having caregivers, most times parents or whoever your caregiver was, who were consistent, responsive, and emotionally available, that were able to express love and have a more secure environment for you, where you felt as though if you were to turn to a caregiver that they were going to be there for you and not reject you or not be absent or whatever, which we'll talk about more. The traits that come along with the secure attachment style, these people tend to be more comfortable with closeness and space. They're comfortable typically with intimacy, but also does value independence in a healthy way. They can balance out that we need both the intimacy, but we also need space from the people, the relationships that we have. And when we're talking about attachment styles, a lot of times I think that we automatically think about parent child because that's where or caregiver and child, that's where it develops from. And then we move forward and think that it only pertains to romantic relationships, but these traits can go with any type of relationship and can affect any type of relationship, whether those are friendships or work relationships. So just keep that in mind as well. Secure attachment style typically is shows up where someone is more open and is able to communicate their needs more clearly and more openly, and generally are more trusting of other people's intentions. Let's say you are having an attachment style that is secure. If you're in a fight, then you say, I feel hurt. Can we talk about it? Instead of maybe avoiding it. And again, we'll go into that in the other ones to give you more of an idea of how that would look with different attachment styles. So anxious or avoidant, you might, instead of saying, can we talk it out? You might say, I'm going to actually overanalyze this until like 3 a.m. I'm going to have it running through my mind and trying to figure out what happened instead of talking about it. Or you're just going to disappear and ghost the person entirely instead of trying to talk it out. Now, we can change our attachment styles, and we're going to talk about in each attachment style how we can get to a secure attachment style, because that is the ideal. If you didn't grow up with this, the good news is you can learn it through therapy, building self-trust, and experiencing safe and healthy relationships that model stability.
So I'm wondering for you, Steph, when you hear a client kind of tell you, I feel like my friends never want to hang out with me, or, they're kind of saying like they never text me back, or I
Mhm.
feel that, I'm being excluded, or what I give isn't really being given in return.
Mhm.
Where do you feel as the therapist that there's kind of this difference between I'm securely attached, but
Mhm.
I'm recognizing that there's certain things that maybe aren't okay or are making me feel uncomfortable, versus like, okay, I'm just genuinely being like anxious. Like, this is just not a healthy way. Or we'll talk about like the disorganized attachment as well.
Mhm.
Like, this is not a healthy way of viewing the situation. And I can probably come up with a rationale for these things, because the truth is that also when healthy, like when you're in a healthy attachment style and you're seeing certain things, you can probably come up with a rationale for that as well. But
Mhm.
at a certain point, you don't want to be making up rationales for people's bad behavior. So like, where do you create that distinction between I'm just recognizing that there is certain things happening, whether it's in a toxic romantic relationship or in an unhealthy friendship or a one-sided friendship or a family relationship that's not helpful. Where does the line go between this is actually happening and I'm not
Mhm.
just like in an unhealthy attachment style
Mhm.
versus like I'm going a little cuckoo in my head?
Yeah. Well, I think that one of the that's a really great question, and one of the things that is really important to preface here is that our attachment styles can give us information, but they are not the be all and end all. So just
Mhm.
because you have a secure attachment style doesn't mean that every relationship in your life is this perfectly healthy, nothing going wrong. We're more dynamic than that. So we sometimes find ourselves in relationships or of any type that might not be actually healthy or serving us in a way that is healthy and balanced. So that's really kind of exploring what else might be going on. Are these people, is it something within you? Is it something that maybe you are overly trusting because you have a secure attachment style? Is it because these people are taking advantage of you? Is it something that is completely based on your experience with hearing a friend talking about maybe being pushed out of a friend group? There's a lot of things that could be at play there, so it's really trying to figure out and get to the bottom of what's going on here. And maybe if this is how you're feeling and we get to the bottom of it and it's really just not a healthy relationship, a secure attachment style will try to remove themselves from those relationships then. And that would be ideal because you can also find other friendships and other relationships that are more healthy and balanced.
Yeah, I think that that's a good point. And I really wanted to take a minute and just kind of acknowledge this core idea that a secure attachment means feeling safe and consistent and
Mhm.
respectful in relationships, but it's also getting respect in the relationship,
Yeah.
right? So at the end of the day, it's not to rationalize bad behavior. You can recognize things and take responsibility and grow, but you also have the ability within a secure attachment to recognize something's not right or not okay, or you deserve better and create those appropriate boundaries.
Mhm.
Um, and it's just something I kind of wanted to bring up because I can imagine hearing this secure attachment style from someone who isn't as familiar saying, okay, so like am I just supposed to like see the world through rainbow colored glasses? Like how is this helpful to me? Like I'm
Mhm.
everyone and their brother and sister is just going to step all over me. That's
Mhm.
not the point. That's not the point. And I
Yeah.
just kind of wanted to think out loud with you as to how that can be communicated, because I feel like everything else where our brain has the ability to even take like a healthy concept and make it unhealthy.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you are more than your attachment style. And that is something that we'll talk a little bit more about later, that it can be, again, information, but it is not the entirety of you and guiding every part of your life. There's other things at play too.
Absolutely. So talking about the anxious attachment. So why and where is it developing from? A lot of the time it's linked to inconsistent caregiving. So sometimes the parent was nurturing, other times distant. It would have left the kid like very unsure of what to expect. A lot of the time this could have been even potentially a parent that was to a certain degree neglectful, right? So a lot of the traits that are associated with this is like fear of abandonment, reassurance, seeking constantly, someone who's maybe very highly sensitive to changes in tone, mood, or response times. So a lot of the time I see reels on Instagram about how, they're kind of trying to portray an unhealthy situation and saying like, it's not your fault that you're so sensitive to your partner's like change in mood or change in tone. Like you were trained to be hyper alert in the way that you grew up to every little change to keep you safe from your environment. So this is really where that can come up, maybe to a more extreme sense, or maybe that's kind of touching a little bit more on trauma. So you may really overanalyze interactions or assume the worst, and obviously that can be very unhealthy and very, very harmful when you are actually in a healthy relationship, and you kind of end up running your healthy relationship into the ground. Because if the other person is not experiencing this and you are experiencing this and you're not getting the proper, support, help, guidance, tools, therapy to work on this problem, either you're going to be in a very unhealthy situation, even if it had the potential of being healthy, or you're just going to ruin that relationship.
Mhm.
Um, so like if your partner's telling you, I'm going to call you tonight, they might quickly think, okay, they said like, oh, the whole quote unquote, we need to talk. Even though, guys, I don't think that that's ever going to change. Just like use a different sentence. Please don't say we need to talk. Okay.
Because everyone's
Just for
mind goes
anyone, for
nuts.
all of us who have potentially suffered from anxious attachment at some point, let's just like remove that from the vocabulary. But, saying, I remember I also, by the way, I used to be this way with my bosses. If at the time when I was working under someone, my boss would have been like, hey, like, can I catch you at 3? I want to meet with you quickly. My heart would sink. I
Mm.
would like have a panic. I'm like, okay, I'm in trouble. I'm getting fired. I'm like planning my future. And guys, like, this is something you really need to work on. It's not,
Mhm.
first of all, you're not alone. Second of all, you're not crazy.
Mhm.
We are unlearning something that from literally infancy, we were being trained to learn, to do, to think, to see the world this way, because, and we've talked about this before, the concept of disorders serving a purpose. And not that this is a disorder per se, but a lot of the time when we have these dysfunctional ways of behaving, thinking, whatever, it was because it was our mind and body's way of protecting us at a certain point in time, of keeping us safe.
Mhm.
And once we gain that understanding and awareness, we have to unlearn it and teach ourselves, actually, hey, this is more harmful than helpful. This is not keeping me safe anymore. Maybe it did at one point, but it's not now.
Mhm.
So really thinking about, that piece of it, of giving yourself some grace in that situation, but also saying, okay, this isn't helping me. And really working towards that path of being more secure, and understanding that really therapy can help slow down that overthinking, challenge that catastrophic craziness going on in your mind, practice that self-soothing when that anxiety comes up for somebody. And you also, a lot of that, and this is also something that I do a lot when I'm doing dating coaching, or I'm helping somebody within the marriage space, like surrounding yourself with healthy people. Like this
Mhm.
is a place where boundaries comes in. Like attachment, I feel like attachment theory and like the whole concept of boundaries are really hand in hand, because when you see something is actually an unhealthy situation, is a toxic situation, or you're just like, this is just not my thing. It doesn't always have to be this big dramatic thing. Sometimes you could be in a friendship and say, I just think that we're not a good match for friendships. And how do you in a healthy way deal with that?
Mhm.
Because a lot of the time, if you have one of the more unhealthy attachment styles, even something as small or potentially as silly feeling as that can become problematic.
Yeah. And on this note, I know you had mentioned something about trauma earlier, and I think it's important to also recognize that while our attachment styles normally are developing in infancy and childhood, there are certain circumstances that can knock you out of a secure attachment style. Let's say you were in a really, really unhealthy relationship, whatever the circumstances were that you ended up in that relationship despite you having a secure attachment style, and it was a traumatic relationship, or you
Mhm.
had a traumatic event happen to you with another person, or mental health disorders. Certain ones are more prone to having different types of, or showing different types of attachment styles at work. Like for borderline personality disorder is one that I'm thinking about, where there is this anxious avoidant behavior a lot of times with interpersonal relationships. So just keep that in mind as well, that it's not 100% because of something that happened in childhood. Sometimes you might have had a wonderful childhood growing up, secure attachment style with your parents, but other things were at play.
Yeah, I love that you brought that up, because it's such a true statement what you just said. Like you can be coming from such a healthy place, and a traumatic event, an unhealthy relationship, a toxic situation,
Mhm.
even with a friendship,
Yeah.
severe bullying throughout middle school, high school. It doesn't have to be infancy. It doesn't even have to be childhood. It could be in adulthood,
Hmm.
or you were in an unhealthy situation. And like we said, this is a learned behavior. So like you learned what you needed to do to survive that situation, but then our brain has a hard time being like, okay, I'm no longer in that situation, I don't need to act like that anymore. That's kind of what happens, is that that becomes the new norm in our mind. That becomes the new automatic thought process, and we have to undo that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about the avoidant attachment style. And why this typically develops is commonly when caregivers were emotionally unavailable, dismissive, or discourage closeness. And I hear this a lot with some of my clients where for one reason or another, that their parents were not really attentive to them. Maybe both of them were out of the household a lot or kind of would disappear sometimes. And there was not a reliable, you couldn't really rely on the caregiver. So the child learns to become self reliant. And in adulthood or as you grow up, a lot of the traits that we see is a value of like hyper independence, sometimes even sees intimacy as danger, avoiding, like again, avoidant attachment, avoiding relationships, prefers self reliance, and downplays the importance of relationships. And often, when they start feeling overwhelmed or too close, that's when they might withdraw or step back, and they can appear emotionally distant, even if they really do care about the other person. They just are having a hard time like getting over the fence to be able to express that, because they're avoiding that intimacy. So it could show up like a partner saying like I love you, and you respond with like thanks. And I mean, you shouldn't say I love you back if you don't mean it, but if you are just unable to respond in that way. It kind of reminds me, I just watched this episode of Gilmore Girls, so I have to bring it in, where
Hello, is this rumor true? I'm sorry, I'm cutting you off. Are they having like a new season or something?
I
Or
don't
are they just
know. I know Lauren Graham is always saying that anytime they call her back to do Gilmore Girls, she will do it. So I know she's been on the circuit saying that. So I don't know. I
like
am
what
always,
was that picture of the two of them circulating? Was that from an award show? I didn't know, like I didn't know what I was looking
oh,
at.
I didn't even know about that. This is
What?
I know.
What
So
kind of a super fan are
I know
you?
I have no idea. Obviously, I could tell you anything about this show, but not anything else.
No, they are like the show is very, very much trending right now. And I
Yeah.
don't know if it's because they're coming up with like like I don't know what something is going on. I was so
Yeah.
sure you knew about this.
Yeah, well, I remember in 2016 they did the Year in the Life,
Yeah, but
and
everyone
that
said it
was
was absolutely horrible.
I know I kind of rejected it. I want to have as much as I can of them, but at the same time, I'm like I kind of reject everything about
Sometimes you just
them.
have to like let the leaves fall where they may and like keep them there. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
yeah,
Like,
absolutely. So we shall see. But this episode, this was in the first season where Dean and Rory are dating, and it's a 3 month anniversary, and Dean says, I love you. And then she just looks like a deer in headlights. And
I
basically,
remember this.
yeah, it was big, and they broke up for a couple of episodes. And she's like, "Oh, I love the car," because like apparently a 16-year-old was building a car for her, but we won't address that or
We'll get
anything
into
like that.
the logistics of that. But you know what? Years ago, our brains were different than they are now when we didn't have
Yeah,
screens occupying every minute of our time, quite
right. And there
frankly.
wasn't computers operating the
Right,
cars, so it was
right.
more like if you were handy, you could do it. So, anyway, basically, in flash forward, I believe an episode or two, she was really just like having a moment where she was fighting, like Rory was kind of battling with everyone, and she ran away. Even she was battling with Lorelai too, and she ran away to her grandparents' house. And her mom Lorelai was having a conversation with her when she found out why they actually broke up, and she said, "I don't want you to." Like not be able to say I love you to the right person. And basically Rory, I think that if we're kind of psychoanalyzing it, Lorelai had a throughout the series, it was a big theme that she had an issue with intimacy and relationships. And we know her relationship with her parents, where they were much more of the time where just like not super close. They kept everyone at arm's length, including their daughter. So she learned, at least in my head canon, she learned to become super self-reliant, as we see with Lorelai,
Yeah,
and
hyper independence.
hyper independent and unable to uh, she often struggled in romantic relationships, and that's what Rory had learned from this. So that just reminds me of that. I know I also had a client that had an experience like this, and definitely had an avoidant attachment style before she did so much work, and I was so proud of her. But this person, a lot of it came from a cultural thing where I just don't want to give too much information, but
I've had very similar things where certain cultures are, I guess, are a little bit on the colder end
yeah.
in terms of how they express emotion and
Hmm.
how they express love, or sometimes the children feeling like
Yes.
um, they need to earn affection, they need to earn love or worth, and this can mess you up when you're older. That's all I'm
Yeah.
gonna say.
Absolutely, absolutely. But especially when you might be coming we're just different generations and different cultures are different, so it could be really difficult to navigate that, but it's possible. So the path toward a more secure attachment style is learning that vulnerability isn't weakness. It's
Yeah.
practicing open communication and slowly allowing safe people in. So people who are maybe understanding or recognizing that this is something that you're working on, and not going to exploit it, because there are some people who also have unhealthy things about them that might not be the best people to have relationships with. But if you can allow someone who is trying to be there for you and is giving you all the green flags, that's maybe a safe person that you can consider slowly allowing in instead of just completely shutting them down and out.
100%. 100%. So that really brings us to more of the disorganized attachment. And this is known also as fearful avoidant attachment. So where is this piece coming from? So this one's often rooted in inconsistent or even like very frightening caregiving. This one is more the one that a lot of the time gets associated with trauma. This is where the caregiver may have been a source of both comfort and fear. So it was like very confusing for them. They never knew what they were going to get. Their relationships felt like Russian roulette. And a lot of these traits are really where that person might really crave closeness, but is also very scared of that closeness, kind of like in Gilmore Girls in that situation. Scared of like what letting somebody in might mean or how it can hurt them. Um, and craving the closeness, but rejecting it because they're so scared of the fear of rejection. They're so scared of betrayal. They're so scared of re experiencing all the same mixed signals that they got as a child. So when they're pursuing intimacy, a lot of the time, this is where self sabotage comes in. This is where someone might be pulling away. And a lot of the time, they struggle with trust due to some of the past inconsistent or traumatic relationships. And a lot of the time, like somebody might text them, let's say, I miss you, come over right now. And then when you show up, they kind of feel like the other person's thinking, oh, why are you here? And that might have been their experience growing up. So that is the automatic thought that that's coming up for them. And kind of their motto in their head is, please come here and be with me, but not too close, but wait, don't leave me, right? So it's that push and pull, that back and forth. And this is where a lot of the time people end up, I mean, the truth is this can happen in a lot of the attachment styles, but a lot of the time here we see people kind of destroying their own relationships, obviously unwillingly and potentially unknowingly, but this is what ends up happening. And with this type of attachment style, the path towards something more secure it really requires a lot of the time healing from their past, doing some trauma work, since this style is often really tied to deeper wounds. And it's not just kind of necessarily a learned behavior, but it's really like you need to heal those parts of you. So a lot of the time when people talk about doing inner child work or healing their childhood self, that's where this can be very much a humongous part of that, or a reason as to why someone might be doing that work. And therapy really helps them untangle from that fear of love, so that the relationship can really feel safe instead of chaotic.
Hmm. This is a really interesting attachment style because I see it coming up a lot where people who might self-describe themselves as like empaths or really in tune with the energy around them. And I'm not saying this is for every single one of those people, but a lot of times what happens is that from this attachment style, you develop like a hypervigilance because you're trying to, even when you're not even recognizing it, you're trying to look for signs that like, okay, is this person like wanting me to hug them right now? Can I hug them? Or is this person going to
Mhm.
yell at me if I hug them? Because one day the same person might act one way and be super lovey-dovey, and the next day they are yelling and like if you try to do the exact same thing, which is really inconsistent, especially for children. We have to be so mindful about having stability in how we react to children, so that they can feel more secure. So be mindful if you're a parent of that. But that hypervigilance you might feel then when you're older, where you are kind of always on guard with that. You're picking up on the little cues around you that someone's angry and something's going on. So that's actually can manifest itself into that, like being an empath or
Mhm.
just being uh, very sensitive to, again, the energies around you.
Yeah. And just by the way, to create a distinction really quickly, in case anyone's like, okay, I really don't get it. What's the difference between
Mhm.
anxious attachment and fearful attachment or disorganized attachment? The anxious attachment is really coming from a core fear of like, you're going to leave me, and has more of a pattern of, I really want that closeness and that reassurance and that constant connection. But the disorganized attachment, or like we say, fearful attachment, is more coming from a place of fear,
Mhm.
of fear that, not that the person's going to leave, but fear that they're scared of love itself. Like they view the relationship or love as they are doomed to get hurt, and they want the closeness, but the closeness is going to lead to a dangerous situation potentially. And within that pattern is more of a push and pull dynamic. And they want that intimacy, but they're so scared of being rejected or overwhelmed, or maybe feeling like this isn't going to end well. So when they are pursuing that closeness, it's always almost met with like a withdrawal, um, because the hot and cold behavior in their mind is essentially protecting them from getting all the way inside. But with the dynamic of anxious attachment, they end up almost becoming like overly clingy or hyper vigilant if they sense like a distance, like, oh, why, where, how, like that's why they're kind of, when you think about somebody going through a conversation a million times in their head, or like sending their texts to like a group chat. Don't worry, guys, I know all the girls do this all the time, so like I'm not saying you have issues, but when that's like truly you feel like you can't get through a conversation without doing that, and you're just kind of dissecting every little thing, that's really more of where the anxious attachment comes in. So just
Mm.
hope that creates a little bit of a clearer understanding of the difference.
Yeah, the distinction there. All
Yeah.
right, so here we're going to give you some rapid fire examples just to help call you out a little bit, and help yourself call yourself out and recognize, hey, this might be an attachment style that I am dealing with. There's nothing wrong. I hope that you can meet yourself with non-judgment here, because this is just something, again, that's information. We can make changes with this and we can work on it, but information is power, awareness is power. So keep in mind all of that. So here's some ways, again, not a whole inclusive list, but giving you an idea as to how certain attachment styles show up in different relationship patterns. So let's start with dating. An anxious attachment style, you're overanalyzing emojis like you're in the CIA. Or avoidant, you reply to a whole paragraph of someone expressing their feelings to you and lovey-dovey and all of that, and you reply with the word cool. Period. You have to add the period in. I always find that
I
that's
was gonna say, by the way, the period is not like in your head. When someone is like, okay, period, you're in trouble. Something's wrong. Like, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. And if you haven't gotten that like information, we need to come up with like the social norms behind texting, and like go take that class, because I'm sorry, if someone's texting me okay period,
Mhm.
I don't know that I'm going to be okay, period.
It's so true. I think we need a texting etiquette class, because some people are just not great texters, and that's all it comes down to.
And by the way, that's also a really important thing to know. I'll tell
Mhm.
you, I'm sorry, I'm going to call out my husband. I'll
Mhm.
let him know later. But when we were dating,
Mhm.
oh my gosh, his texting was horrendous. Like, I will send him a text and he wouldn't answer me for like 7 hours. Or
Hmm.
sometimes, like I don't remember what it would be. Like, I think like Shabbat would come out, and normally when you're like dating and you're texting, a person would text them right after Shabbat and be like, how was your Shabbat?" And I wouldn't hear from him until 1 o'clock in the morning, and I'm like, dude. And or I would say something really important, and I got really angry about it. And there were certain times where like my understanding of that was, you just don't care enough and
Mhm.
you're not putting effort in. And the truth is, like, I'm not sitting here and saying that behavior is okay. And I think that is that something that bothers you, you should talk about it in a relationship. But genuinely, like, he's an incredible husband and I love him and I'm so grateful for him. But had I made my decision in my relationship based off of his form of communicating through texts,
Mhm.
that would have been horrible because I would have lost him. And thank goodness for human interaction, because not everyone's way of behaving through the phone is necessarily the way that socially acceptable norms would say is the way to do it. And so I think, and I think the important part is that when we did talk and I did express things, he cared, and that the person he was in person was what mattered most.
Mhm.
But my point to you is, yes, it's true. Some people really are just not great texters.
Mhm.
Some people, like, truly, as we can joke from today until tomorrow, but they don't have like the texting social etiquette understandings. So just be careful how many assumptions you're making from texting. Like I always say, and Steph always says, avoid serious conversations or topics or
Mhm.
feelings through texts. Like, it's bound to not end well.
Yeah.
And just you're not helping yourself. You're not helping them. You're not helping yourself. Like, don't do that.
Totally. And Rachel gave a good example of how secure attachment might show up in dating is when you communicate and let them know, like, hey, this is something that's not really working for me, or this is something that I feel based on this. And you can communicate and figure out a resolution. And let's talk about friendships. An anxious attachment style. Maybe you freak out if a friend doesn't like your Instagram story. Avoidant is you need like a 3 day nap after having an interaction with someone, and or maybe it's a date and then you're like, okay, it was a great date, but I'm going to now like just like avoid it and go to sleep after this instead of like responding to them or something like that. Disorganized might be that you're inviting someone over and then you ghost them, and that's really not cool. So workplace, an anxious attachment style is, Rachel brought it up earlier. It's like my boss like reached out to me saying like, let's have a meeting. And it's like, oh my gosh, well, I need to pack my bags and I'm out. That is a little bit of an anxious like indicative of an anxious attachment
I
style.
mean, listen, I'll call myself out, like, and by the way, guys, like, you can have these, and we'll talk about this in a second. It doesn't need to become like your entire personality. You can
Yeah.
recognize that something you're doing in a moment is a certain type of attachment style, like falls under that category and isn't
Mhm.
healthy, and then just, you know, re rework your brain, and you don't have to turn it into a whole big dramatic thing.
Yeah, I think that you can have an attachment style and still have some areas where you behave in ways that might be indicative of another
Right,
attachment style, for
right.
sure. Again, in the workplace, avoidant might be like you completely, like you're calling out sick if there's a team building exercise. Like you're not trying to be doing that. And if you're in a secure attachment style and your boss reached out to you, you might just recognize that just because like they message you in an email that says like let's meet at 3 period. That's like, oh, it's just like he's talking like or that person's talking like a normal person and just punctuating because that's proper grammar, and just recognizing that it might not be anything more than that.
Right. Not
And
not the end of every sentence does not need to have an exclamation point. And by the way, I'm fully saying that to myself.
I need to say that to myself because I always hear my clients talking about how they get anxious in certain with certain text responses. So like I over exclaim everything. Like anytime I'm like emailing or texting, I give so many exclamation points, and it's like it's just because I'm afraid that someone else is going to interpret it in the wrong way. And
It's
it
hard,
must
but it's also I think I've realized that in the mental health space, we all do that because we're trying to come from such a positive space that then when
yeah.
you leave the mental health world and you're emailing like anyone else, I
Mhm.
sometimes I have my husband look at my emails or something because he'll be like, "Rachel, what? You're not having like a therapy session through this email. Like, what is happening?" And he'll cut out like 15 sentences and change
Mhm.
like 13 exclamation points. And I'm just like, I can't. It's really like two different worlds. And I think
Yeah.
for the work world, that's where some of my anxieties would come in because I
Mhm.
would, depending on who you were talking to or what world you were walking into, you were met with such different types of personalities and reactions to things that you're like, how am I supposed to interpret this? That's a
Mhm.
real thing. Any therapists who experience what I'm talking about, please like write it in the comments because let me know that I'm not alone, please.
Yeah, definitely not alone here. And again, remember that attachment styles are not life sentences. You can work towards secure attachment and you can achieve secure attachment, even if that was not your initial blueprint. Through therapy, self awareness, healthy relationships, not bringing people into your life who might be super triggering to your worst patterns and not being able to communicate with them if they're not receptive to that, and they're just bringing out the worst in you, maybe that person's not the best to have in your life.
Absolutely. So, guys, I know we touched upon this a couple of times throughout this episode, but just to kind of hone in on it for a second, it can be harmful to over identify with your attachment styles. And we've talked about this a lot when we talked about potentially like the dangers or harms behind, a diagnosis and like you living in it and you just kind of letting it take over your world and your identity and letting it become an excuse. So, for all those same reasons, it can become a label instead of a tool to help you. It can justify your unhealthy behavior. You use it as an excuse, or it keeps you like rooted in the past and just potentially like oh, I feel so bad for myself. This was my upbringing. So, like, this is like I'm doomed for my future. No, like, no, we are humans that are able to continue to develop throughout life, to continue to learn, to continue to grow. And just, us putting this out there, providing this information, creating psychoeducation, it's not for you to like take that and then run with the wind. Like,
Mhm.
take that, learn, digest, process, move on, learn, grow, get better, because you're just taking these things and like allowing it to ruin your life when it totally does not need to.
Mhm.
Totally doesn't need to. This isn't a life sentence. It's not, oh, you have an anxious attachment. This is who you are. Wear it on a t-shirt. No. Like,
Mhm.
no, you are able to be like, hey, oh, like this is coming up for me. All right, well, I know that this is being triggered by this. So let me rework that in my mind and keep doing that until that becomes more of the new automatic thought for you. And, you know, like, c'est la vie. Like, that's it. It doesn't have to be
Mhm.
so much crazier than that.
So let's get into some of the key takeaways. Attachment styles do come from early experiences. However, they can change as a result of other things going on in your life, and they do shape how we show up in relationships today. The four main styles are secure, anxious, avoidant, and disorganized. And any of them can influence how we connect, communicate, and cope with closeness and intimacy. Your attachment style isn't permanent. With awareness, therapy, healthy relationships, you can move toward secure attachment. And a little humor can go a long way in making sense of our messy patterns. That's why we try to bring that into our sessions. We all have some messy patterns that why not call it out with a little bit of humor? And then let's talk about our listeners' question. So, if you aren't aware, we do have a section at the end of each session to answer one of your questions. So, you could send in your questions to us over on Instagram at Coffee and Counseling Podcast, or email it to coffeeandcounselingpodcast@gmail.com. And today's listener's question is, why is it so hard for me to accept love or compliments without feeling awkward? And I think that this this entire session can be really helpful to help answer that question. But I do know that a lot of my clients, and I know for myself as well, I'll call myself out here as well, accepting compliments can feel really awkward. And I think that there's a lot at play with that, perhaps our own feelings of ourselves, maybe insecurities that we have within ourselves, but also social conditioning. A lot of times people perceive that if someone just accepts a compliment by simply saying thank you, that it's like, oh, are they vain? Are they like, what's that? It's like a weird thing that we have. I know I've called myself out for this because I can recall many occasions where I got a compliment on like an outfit, and instead of just saying thank you, I start telling them where I got it from and like how I was excited that it was on sale, or so I just start talking about a
Rationalize it.
story.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I think that there's a lot of things at play, but those are some things that initially come up to mind. And what I would recommend is if you are struggling with accepting compliments, sit with the discomfort, just responding with thank you without any qualifiers, without any explanations.
Absolutely. You said it perfectly, Steph.
All right. So we are hoping you enjoyed today's session and encourage you to reflect, to notice what your own patterns are. Like when you don't get a quick text back, what story are you telling yourself? Do you tend to cling tighter, pull away, or respond calmly? How might that connect to the way you learn to feel safe or unsafe growing up? If you found this session helpful, please consider sharing it with others. And anything we referenced today will be linked in today's show notes. Thank you again for joining us.
Thank you guys for joining us. We'll see you next week.
Thank you so much for being with us today. Please follow our Instagram at Coffee and Counseling Podcast and send any questions you have about any topic to us via direct message for a chance for your question be featured in one of our next sessions. You can also email us your questions or topic suggestions at coffeeandcounselingpodcast@gmail.com. Make sure to check out some of our other sessions available to you right now. Once you drink up all of those and your coffee, come back next Tuesday for our next session.
The information shared in this podcast is for educational and informational purposes only and does not constitute therapy or mental health advice. Listening to this podcast does not establish a therapeutic relationship between you and the hosts. If you are in need of support, we encourage you to seek help from a qualified mental health professional. This podcast is not a substitute for individualized care. We do offer individualized therapy. If you're interested in individual therapy with one of us, please visit our practice website and send us an email to set up a free consultation call. All of the links and our contact info will be in the show notes.